Welcome to the Lyon Brave Show. Lyon Brave, Lyon Brave, Lyon Brave, Lyon Brave.
Hello, I'm Lyon Brave, and today on my show, the Lyon Brave Show, I have Lieutenant Pangaro, who, he's served his time in law enforcement. He made it all the way up the ranks to lieutenant. I believe that he is coaching other officers around the world and training them, and that he's also helping with school security. Lieutenant Pangaro, would you like to take it from here and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. First of all, Lyon, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. So I spent 27 years in law enforcement. I never thought I would be a cop. I was looking for something that would actually be a real career. I had a very humble beginning, very early start. I served my time, and I found that I really enjoyed it. I found that I liked helping people, and that's a cliche in law enforcement, but I did like helping people. I worked my way up. I found myself in the detective bureau, which is a whole different world of law enforcement type of work. I was there for quite a long time. I made rank in the detective bureau, and then I got to bring in officers that I found to be good officers to do the work that was important for my community. Eventually, I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant, and they said, okay, now take all your experience and go to the patrol division and help them out there. So would you do our training? Would you do programs for us? Which I did. I started teaching at the different police academies. Some of the things I taught were in demand. And then I started my own company to teach police officers across the country. And that has really boomed with unfortunately, with the pandemic. I couldn't do it in person. Everything was closed. So we went online, and now we teach officers all across the country. I've even had people from Italy come in onto the program. So it's been really a great run, and it's something that I'm very happy and proud to do, to try and help make police work better so that it better serves our community, so everybody can be safe.
Okay, Lieutenant, what is the name of your program and where can people find it?
Okay, you can find me at pangarotraining.com. Pangaro training.com. That's our website. You can find me there. You can find me on the internet. We have our own podcast starting called the Blue Heart Podcast. That'll be starting in August, and you'll see it all over the place eventually. And I do a lot of writing. I write articles, I write books, I write magazines to try and get the word out and do what I can to give back.
Okay, well, so I have been thinking about what kind of questions I'm going to ask you, and I have like 2 pages of questions. But I also want to talk about like maybe some funner things in the beginning of this. Like I saw that your daughter is in a movie on Netflix. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with her?
Yes, my daughter Marisa Joy. That's her name is Marisa Joy Pangaro, and we were trying to help her when she went to the Performing Arts High School in New Jersey here. It was an option for high school, and they have kids that do dance, kids that do writing, singing. So she wanted to act, and she had some talent. She was a talented kid, and she got recruited for this movie that was written about a squadron of female fighter pilots. And actually what they were a show team for the Navy. They went around like the Blue Angels. They did the shows. And then there was some fictitious country where there was some bad problems, and the Navy said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get these female pilots. They're going to fly in because they're so good at maneuvers, and they're going to distract the enemy. And then behind them will come another squadron that will attack this nuclear base or whatever and take the threat away. Well, that was in 2017 and 2018. They filmed the movie. As happens in the movie business a lot, somebody comes along and buys the rights to it. Then they want to shelve it. They want to hold it. It went round and round. It was finally resold recently, and they renamed it. And now it's called Called to Duty. Called to Duty. And you can find it right now. It's not on Netflix yet, but it's getting there because you have to have so many other watches. But right now you can see it on iTunes Video, Vudu. You can see it there. You can see it on Prime. Prime Video has it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also find it on a lot of on-demand cable places where if you have cable and on-demand, Called to Duty. It's a fun movie. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, well, this is sort of going off of what I have you here talking about, but I'm really glad that we get a chance to talk about entertainment because it's mostly an entertainment channel. And like so, as you heard, her video was shelved So it seemed like maybe she wasn't seeing the labor of her works. And like, I just want to let young artists know that this is an extremely encouraging story to hear, that, the project wasn't just gone, and that it's like it's resurfacing, and there's no telling, if it will get big or not. But I mean, the fact that it's already out there and she got a chance to interact with the cast is its own mega success. But like, so I think this is very encouraging, because like you said, sometimes you think a project is getting the green light, you tell everybody about it, and then it never sees the light of day. So I think that what you just shared was like very hopeful for any artists that have ever been in this situation. I'm guessing it's a lot.
Yeah, and it should be. It is, because we found out, there was rumor that it was bought by Paramount, and they were shelving it because they were ready for Top Gun 2 to come out, and they didn't want to have this movie come out. Two difference in quality. This movie did not cost $500 million like Top Gun 2 did. But it finally got to the right people, and they put it out, and it's it's a fun movie. And her and all the cast are now 5 years older. They were younger. They were in late high school, and then now they're down the road. So it was exciting for our family and for our friends and for everybody who's heard about it from us for the last 5 years. This movie's coming out, and then it finally does come out. So if you're creative, stick with it.
Okay, well, that's awesome. And it's good to see that you're very supportive of your daughter doing like sort of a completely different thing than being an officer. So
Absolutely.
that's awesome. Okay, but I think it's a little time to jump into my questions that are geared specifically at the police. If there's anything that you think you don't want to answer, please don't just let me know that you're not going to answer it. Pass.
Sure.
But don't let me offend you, because I would like to see if I could come up with a question that's good enough to put you in the hot seat a little bit. So,
Well, that's very good.
but we'll start with basic things. Can you just tell us, what do you think is the role of an officer?
Excellent. I think that's a very good question. The role of an officer in general is to ensure that the community where they work is safe for people to function as they go about their business. So they can raise their families. They can enjoy the community. They can go out and do things without the fear of being victimized. And the police officer should be a part of that community, know the people that are that community, as opposed to being an outside group that they don't connect. A while ago, I was on the job, they started the whole concept of a community policing. And everybody said, oh, we're going to get away from real police work. And really, community policing, the name might not be the best name, but the reality is when you connect with that community and they trust you and you trust them, then you can go in and help. People will tell you things where they need help. They won't be afraid that you're going to come in and just do whatever you think is right. You're going to find out what's needed and how can you actually help the people of the community. Because then that's why most people become cops, is they say in every interview, I want to help people. And you say, well, how many people do you really help? Well, you help more people than you know if your head is right going into the job.
Do you really think that most people become cops because they want to help people, and not because in the terrible job market we have these days, that it's decent pay and the pension is something most Americans don't get offered anymore?
Yeah, I think if we break that down, it depends on the time of where we are. When I went for the job, I was a young guy. I came from very humble beginnings. My father passed away when I was 14 years old. I had to go to work and finish high school and feed my mother and my brother. And I never thought about being a cop. When I saw the cops, I went the other way. Not that I was a bad guy, but, I wanted no part of that whole cop thing. And I had a cousin who was a cop. And he would come to and he was in a very affluent town. Like there was no crime in his town. And he would come to Christmas dinner, and he would sit there in the corner and he'd look around. I said, what are you doing? He goes, you got to keep an eye on everybody, Joe. I said, what kind of crime goes on in your town that you're at a Christmas party and you're worried about people doing a bad thing, right? So from him, he was my only experience with the police. And I was married. I had a little baby, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And in all honesty, this is exactly what happened. I'm watching the news and I'm getting very upset with whatever was going on. And my wife says to me, hey, listen, instead of sitting there complaining, why don't you find a way to do something to make everything better? And I said, like what? She goes, I don't know. Your cousin's a cop. Why don't you look into being a cop? I said, okay. So I went and I looked into it. I realized what they did. I figured it out a little bit. I was a good test taker. I took some tests and I got hired. Next thing I know, I'm a cop.
Well, congratulations on being a cop. I think it's a really hard and challenging role to do for several reasons. It's hard to talk about police work without talking about racism and systematic racism. I believe that it's, you know, a lot of police officers, they commute to work, meaning they're living like an hour outside of the community they're policing. And like I do think it's important that if you're going to police a community, you're a part of a community. And I think, you know, one thing that's created is it's creating and I'm just going to use the language in this super sensitive world. It creates white men coming in the Black communities who have never really interacted with Black people, and they're throwing in jail. Like, I've noticed that the punishments for Blacks can be disproportionate, same crime as the punishments to whites, and that's, you know, that's really more to do with what goes on in the law system. But one of the things, like with you know, I guess I want to ask a lot, but like, let's start there. How
Sure.
do we get police officers who are white and coming from suburban environments to better interact with the urban communities that they don't actually belong to and don't understand?
Now, first of all, we got to have you on CNN, Fox News, and all these other places, because nobody has this conversation. They won't talk about it. So good for you. If I can I just finish my last answer? Because I realized I didn't answer your question fully. What I said was, depending on who's going to be a cop, when I went to do it, there were 300 people for 3 jobs. 8 years later, the economy was booming, and we had a need for 8 or 9 cops, and I think 35 people showed up. So I think there is a moment when you say, hey, the pay is pretty good now, and the benefits are pretty good, and that pension is great. But I think it flows with the time. So your next question, I think, is amazing. And you're right. Majority of the officers historically have been white officers, and then they go into minority communities. And there is often a disconnect because we all have different communities. Like my name is Pangaro, so my background is Italian. My wife is Irish. Well, we had, you know, we're both white, but we both had different heritages, different traditions that went between the families. And we had to learn each other's different ways and see how we could blend them. And when I came from a community where there were very few minority people, there were just not a lot of minority people where I grew up. And I went to a town where I worked that there were lots of different people. Matter of fact, I remember somebody in the prosecutor's office telling us there was 40 different languages spoken in our elementary schools. There were so many different people. And I remember being surprised sometimes as a young person, and all of a sudden you come across something that you're not familiar with. You're just not familiar with the rhythms and the movements of different communities. Like my community has rhythms and movements, and now I go somewhere else, and I had to understand who everybody was to try and do the right thing. Now, I've inherently always been a fair guy. I saw the suffering of people. I saw inappropriate things happen in the course of my life, and I said I wanted to do something to make a difference, right? So I tried to go out of my way to act as not a role model for other cops, but to model the behavior that I thought would be the right way to do things. And sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. I met a lot of people that I never would have known in my life that were wonderful people in different communities. You know, a funny story, when I finally made lieutenant and I go back to patrol now I've been out for 15 years, and we have big apartment complexes. And a very, very large Hispanic community had moved into the apartment complexes. And I'm riding around on a Sunday afternoon, and I come around the back of this complex, and it's a beautiful summer day. And there was a whole bunch of people outside. Obviously, they were having a little bit of a party. There was a wooded area behind the building where they were living. They had cleared some of the woods, and here's this pig roasting on a fire at the back of this apartment complex. And I saw this. First of all, I thought, that is the coolest thing I think I've ever seen. I've never seen a big giant pig on a roasting stick. But they all saw me, and I could see some people start to like slink away. They saw the police car. Uh-oh. And I said, oh, they're thinking I'm going to jump out, ruin their party. I'm going to get, okay, let me just roll up and just say hi. And there was somebody there, a gentleman came over, and I guess he was an elder statesman for the group. And he says, "Hi, officer. Listen, we're really sorry about the fire. We'll put it out." I said, "Why would you put it out? You're not done cooking yet." And he says, "Oh, well, we didn't think we were allowed to do that, but we thought it would be okay." It's not bothering me. It's not going to catch the woods on fire. I just got to ask a question. How long is it going to take to cook that? Well, he started laughing. All the people there started. Now, all of a sudden, they come around the car. The kids are coming around the car. They invited me, "When you get off duty, come on back and eat." I'm like, I might actually do that, because this is a community I didn't know. But now, from that day on, a lot of those people see me, they wave now. "Hey, how are you?" And I say, "Hey, how are you doing?" The kids would talk to me, and I would find out when there was problems, that where maybe somebody needed help. Maybe there was a crime going on, and they would tell you about it. There was all kinds of benefits to seeing something different than my experience and opening my eyes to it.
Yeah, that's a good story. I think it is important if the police interact with the communities, the kids, the adults, the people who are afraid of them. I'm a pretty professional woman of color, and I'm terrified of the police. I keep a clean nose. I don't hide the bag. I'm not doing drugs. I'm not prostituting myself. And because of my experiences with the police as a woman of color, and largely, to be honest, white men, I am terrified when I see the police. Like, it almost puts a bad feeling in my stomach, and I am a woman of color, so I do have nephews, and I would say that there have been too many incidences of Black men being shot without even having a weapon on them. And like, so of course the Black community has fear. And now that when Black kids see themselves repeatedly being mowed down with impunity for not even having guns on them, I think of course a young Black man would run when he sees sirens, because I am a woman of color. And when I see the police, I feel fear. So I would like to say, if their job is to make me feel safe, that's not happening. I also, like, I believe that a police's job is not to act as jury and executioner. So how can law enforcement agencies make counter steps from, police brutality, because it is getting out of hand, and police brutality has no color. I certainly want to be clear on that.
Right. I think what you have is and it's, when you say that you are afraid, I hear that. All right. A lot of people don't hear that. Now, we can have disagreements. If we can look at statistics, we can argue all day long. The fact is that many people in different communities do have that impression. They're scared to death, and that's why they behave sometimes the way they do. They take off and run because they're afraid. They don't want to get hurt. I get that. I would be afraid, I think, if I was a parent of a young African-American boy running through the neighborhood, that he got stopped by the cops. I'd be concerned. I think I would consider that, as a guy that didn't have to do that. But I got to tell you what I did do. I have 3 boys that went through young teenage life. And what I told all of them was that if you get pulled over by the cops, put your hands up, put them on the steering wheel, turn the lights on in the car, and keep your mouth shut. Whatever the officer asks you to do, do it. If they tell you to get out, get out. Because you know what? White kids get shot too, right? People sometimes overreact, and bad things happen. But my concern for that is that my young boys were growing up in a world where they've been taught to talk back to authority, to stand up for themselves. And I didn't want them running into some cop who did not take that the right way, who didn't understand the kid is just trying to express himself, or he's got questions about why you stopped him or whatever. And I didn't want them to have a problem. And while it didn't happen as much in my community as it did in yours, I had the same fear as a parent, because I don't know who you're going to meet out there. I don't know what's going to happen. So the reality is that by bringing us together, when we can have a real conversation about what goes on out there in the street, and how can we protect ourselves? What can we do? The cops have to learn, And I think all of our communities have to understand what the cops do and why they do it. They don't want to get hurt either. And there are how many instances of people shooting cops? It happens. And they don't want to get killed either. So I think if we had an honest conversation about it, would it be truthful for me to tell you that people didn't get pulled over sometimes because of their race? That would be a lie. I think we all know that. But it depends on and I'm not saying it's a good thing ever. I'm saying it depends on what it is. If I'm working in a community where I know there's a lot of crime, that a lot of people who live in that community are victimized, right? I'm not looking at people from out of town who are doing it. I'm looking for people who live in the community. That's my job, to try and protect people. And I see people and I stop them. I want to make sure I'm safe. I want to make sure they're safe. If everybody understood that and you're not up to nothing, you're being stopped. Okay, you can fight a ticket that you don't agree with in court. You can fight an arrest, right? If you don't agree with it. But when people start to resist, when they start to fight, when they start to do things other than what they're doing, that's where it gets amped up. And that's where it gets dangerous. And not everyone has enough control over themselves to control the situation as well as they should. And then bad things happen. And that's horrible for everybody. I, for one, don't want that to happen. I know you don't want it to happen. I don't think anyone wants it to happen. But I think every community should be safe, right? And when you look at all these communities, I look at my neighborhood here, and there are some people in my neighborhood here who are problematic for their families. You have domestic violence. You have people who are doing the wrong things to each other. They should be locked up, and so they don't affect the rest of us. Well, every community should be safe. And we have to, what do we expect the police to do? This is where I think you were onto something earlier when you asked me what's the role of a cop? Because I say right now, we're seeing lots of cities and towns changing the paradigm of what they want the police to do, right? So one of the things as a police officer that I could evaluate if my officers were doing their job, right? If I was a plumber and I hired people to put in toilets, and I'd say, I expect you to do 10 toilets a week, and 7 of my employees do 10, and 2 of them are doing 2 toilets. Well, I got to find out why you're not doing your job. So in police work, what do we measure? Well, we measure car stops. How many cars do you stop? Because you're supposed to stop cars that are violating the law by their equipment, the way the person drives, whatever. You're supposed to stop suspicious people that are in places doing things that look like they could be maybe going to commit a crime. You're supposed to make arrests of people who do things. So we evaluate that. Lots of communities now are saying that puts the police at odds with people. So therefore, we're no longer going to evaluate car stops. So now the cops don't feel compelled to have to stop cars. If they see somebody racing through a red light, okay, maybe they're going to stop that car, give the driver a ticket. But you don't feel compelled to stop people. They're not counting arrests, saying that doesn't matter anymore. And I think this is a bigger law enforcement message that we have to have to our communities. What do you want us to do? Do you want us to keep people safe and arrest criminals? Or do you want us to just be report takers? Because if we're going to arrest people, the reality is a lot of people do not want to be arrested. They disagree with the arrest. They don't think they should be arrested, and they want to fight with you. And then things get out of hand and it gets bad. So do we just want officers to go out and take reports? Mrs. Jones, what happened? This guy did this to me. Let me take your report. And then we find that guy and we send him a letter. Hey, turn yourself in when it's convenient, and we'd like to arrest you and hold you accountable for what you did. Or do we go out into the community and try and make the community safe? That's what we have to talk about. What are the community standards we should go by so that everyone is more comfortable with what's going on out there? Because it can be bad, and it's not good for our country. It's not good for the individuals who have problems, and it's not good for the cops.
I want to not feel intimidated by the police when I'm doing absolutely nothing wrong. And I want that when I call the police, that they're helpful and they're listening to me and they're not disrespectful. This is a very painful topic, for me, and I think us all, actually, because the police have been doing what I consider a terrible job, probably since before my mother's generation. The police force is dominantly white male. I believe it's 11 to 13% female. And like 11 to 13% minority. If you include all minorities in 2023, it's probably bigger than that. But so like for instance, a black female officer is probably something like 3 to 6%, maybe. And so I have questions if there's no one representing me on the police force. Well, bias is always an implicit thing. Oh, shut up, little lady. And then rape is a real crime. Which the Me Too movement was a big deal. And I think a lot of women want to know, why do police never take, like, it seems like they never take rape seriously? Because the thing I've heard from most women is I reported it, and it was more hurtful going through that process where I was dismissed, or they've already heard so many stories about it being a hell going to police officers, they just don't report it. And then I will say that when I reported it to the police officer, they were like scribbling a note. They seemed very disinterested, and essentially they didn't even write their badge and name on the police report. So it felt like a joke. And I've had interactions where I needed the police's help, because I am a woman, and I'm a very small woman. I'm a 5'2" woman in a ghetto. And I've needed the police's help, and they were not helpful at all. They were dismissive. They were hurtful. Like even on something that was less hurtful than being violated, someone stole my scooter, and it's kind of an expensive item for me, like a couple $1,000 needed to get around town. Someone stole my scooter. These people were caught on film, and the police, like, we have face recognition cameras, and like I felt they were like just very dismissive. Like so I googled the statistic, and about from like vehicular thefts, only about like 18% of vehicular thefts are solved. And then actually, even though we've been screaming defund the police, the police actually got more funding in 2023. So obviously, I'm sure you're in touch with what's going on. The crime has been spiking. The police have gotten more funding, and yet the rates of murders that have been solved since 1970, which is the police used to be very successful at solving murders. Almost 70% of murders were solved, has been dropping. So how come with more funding, the police, and more technology, the police are becoming more incompetent?
First of all, Lyon, let me say, I can't apologize for all of law enforcement. I can say, I'm sorry that happened to you as a person. I'm sorry you were not treated appropriately. Like I would say to anybody, I go out and I try, when I teach, one of the things I try and teach my cops, every single class I go to, whether I'm teaching criminal investigation, sexual assault investigation, drug investigation, or motor vehicle theft investigation, no matter what I'm teaching, I try to instill in them, they understand that their role is important, that no matter whatever the crime is, it might seem small to you and insignificant to you, it's the whole world to the person who's called you for help. And they are going to judge all of law enforcement based on how you behave. That's going to cause a problem for your brothers and sisters down the road when they're trying to do the job. And it's not right. I always want them to say, if this was your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, your cousin, whatever, and they called the police, how would you want them to behave when they got there? How would you want them to say? And you're right, I have seen those things happen. Of course we have, but I have seen it across the board. See, I see it from the inside, and I've seen officers of all different backgrounds do the same kind of things. You have some very good, decent, very talented law enforcement personnel, men and women, and then you have others that got the job and they need to be told by their supervisors, they need to be observed and to do things differently. So I know that happens. And I know that it's tough. When you're saying, why is there so much more money and technology, and now you're not getting as much crime fighting? I can tell you this, crystal clear. The message has gotten out to law enforcement that if you do your job, even if you do your job 100% correct, you can be arrested, you can be indicted, you can lose your pension, you can have all kinds of problems. So you're seeing a great big step back, right? The men and women are saying, and this is of all races of law enforcement officers, they're saying, you know what, I'll answer my calls, but I'm not doing anything more to get myself in trouble, because even if I'm doing the right thing, I can be in trouble, and I don't want to get in trouble. And that is a danger for all of society, because I'll tell you, the truth is that the only thing that protects any community is of aggressive, proactive law enforcement, where cops are out there looking for people who are going to do bad things to other people. and then identify them and then take action where there's appropriate. What happens is when they're overzealous and they do too much and they view people as a giant group instead of individuals that are doing something, that's when we run into problems. And that is a matter of training. That's a matter of a conversation. That's a matter of people like me trying to bring this message to all of law enforcement. Do the right thing every single time, like it was somebody in your family. How would you like it if you heard this story? If my daughter came to me and say, Dad, they stole my scooter, well, most people say, oh, it's a scooter. No, that means a lot to her to get around where she lives. And that costs a lot of money. And well, the cop was dismissive. The cop treated me poor. He didn't really care. I would be very, very annoyed with that behavior, right? And that's what we have to try and understand. And I think the biggest takeaway from this part of the conversation is to understand that cops everywhere are stepping back. They're answering their calls. They're doing what they're sent to. But a lot of them are no longer doing that proactive stuff. They're seeing something and going, okay, well, nobody called me. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to get myself in that position. And that's dangerous. That's dangerous. Now, do we need a culture shift? Do we need to have, like, this conversation is great that we're having it. I hope people who are watching your program hear me and the words that I'm trying to say, the sincerity, but it's all of us. All of us have to have this conversation and say, okay, what should I do if I get stopped? Well, if you didn't do anything wrong, you shouldn't have been stopped. Of course, I would say that about anybody. But if you rolled through a stop sign, if you did whatever and you got stopped, just like me, I say the same thing. If I did it, I have to deal with it. But should we have more discretion in that? To give somebody a ticket just to give them a ticket, I'm glad we're not looking at that anymore, in honesty. Let's see what we can do. Let's find other ways to see what the cops are doing. Are they engaging in good stuff? Are they going to find out, you talk about a rapist, how, as a father of a daughter who's living in a city, and I try to constantly tell her, listen, pay attention to where you are, pay attention to what you're doing, look around, be aware of the situation, right? Be careful what you're doing. Don't put yourself in a situation. And she's out, oh, I'm living my life, I'm having a great time. And I'm saying, just please be careful, because there are bad people out there who will do bad things. They will take advantage. So I'm trying to knit this all together here in a more comprehensive answer. But the reality is, yeah, some things have been inappropriate. And I know that there's people like me that are trying to do something different in the future. We're trying to let our voices be heard and say, hey, we have to police our communities. What does the community want? What kind of policing do you want? You just talked about, your scooter being stolen and there's sexual assault people out. Well, how do you want us to approach that? How do you want law enforcement to keep you safe so you can walk up the street at 2 a.m. and go home? You can go out with your friends and not be afraid something's going to happen to you. There's a give and take that we have to try and figure out, because no one should be treated improperly by the police. Nobody. Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely want law enforcement to take advantage of face recognition cameras. Like everyone talks about privacy. If we're going to be honest, our privacy has been evaporating since like the beginning of the first piece of technology. And you know what? So use it. If it's already out there, use it. Like if my face is already all over the internet, I would like it to be used to help me. Okay, because there's a reason we have been acquiring this technology, which is to use it to help. At least that's what I thought. And so when face recognition is available, and in my opinion, and I know there's government clearance and all these IDs and all this bureaucracy that always stops things from getting done, even if you want to be proactive. Technically, they should be able to just press a button and have records and records of information on the guys who stole my bike. They were caught on camera. So I'm a little annoyed that we have this technology and we're not taking advantage of it. I do want to say thank you for handling me compassionately with what I said. But I wasn't expecting that emotion to come out of me. So what I want to say is that there is a big wound between the public and the police, and we've been seeing it with the riots. We've been seeing it with the defund the police movement, and that is because, and it is painful, that so much of America agrees on one thing, no matter what race or gender they are. which is the police have not been protecting us and we do not feel safe. Because this has been a national movement, and it's not just been Black. There are so many hashtags that says police brutality has no color. There are so many white people who feel outraged. It's the police have been making people feel unsafe. And actually the group of kids who booed me was a privileged group of kids. I'm talking like white privileged kids in Greenwich Village with their daddy's money. So that should be the most safest and protected class of citizens in America, and they can't stand the police. They hate the police with a passion. And how come how do you expect the lowest of the communities who are being targeted, unfairly brutalized by the police, to have respect and love for the police when the richest of society can't stand them? And that kind of hate, that kind of animosity that the police have, when they used to be looked up to, everyone used to want to be a police officer. They used to be role models. How has that been lost? And how can that wound be mended?
Well, I think you ask very important questions. And I think sometimes the answers are not as easy as just A, B, C, or D. I think we have to look and say, what are the truths behind some of these things? Your truth is that you feel very uncomfortable when you see the police. That's a truth. I can give you all the statistics in the world, but that's how you feel. So trying to understand that you feel like that, if I knew that and I was an officer in your community, I would want to make sure you didn't feel that way about me. That would bother me because I can't do my job if that's how I feel. And that's what I'm not there to scare people. I'm there to make people feel confident. Hey, there's a cop on the block, there's a cop on the train. I'll be safe. Right? I'll be safe because there's a cop here. Not that cop's going to hurt me because I'm on the train, because they don't like me. And I think looking statistically at what actually goes on, people say, oh, they poo-poo that all the time. Oh yeah, don't give me statistics. Well, statistics tell a lot of truths. We just don't always want to see the truths. So while the police do need a culture change, they do. Absolutely. I'm working towards that, trying to do what I can to help them. I think we all need to decide what do we want from our law enforcement community, and how can we speak to each other, not just yell at each other.
Joe, I'm running out of recording time. I have less than a minute. I would like to ask you a few more questions. If you have time, can you connect with me on Facebook? If you don't have time, I'll work with the footage I have.
Yeah, I have a little bit more time, sure.
Okay, so I'll send you another link on Facebook.
Okay. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to drop a truth bomb. Racism is for absolute fools. Unfortunately, America seems to have its fair share of them, holding us back from making cool, real progress. But fear not, because we have the power to rise above their nonsense. Enter Lyon Brave's music channel, where cool beats and smooth rhymes serve as the antidote to ignorance. Lyon's tunes hit harder than a fresh rap verse, challenging racism with style and grace. So, let's kick those fools to the curb and subscribe to Lyon's channel. Together, we'll unleash a wave of coolness that'll wash away their ignorance. Each subscription moves us closer to a cooler, more inclusive America. Join the movement, because real progress is all about keeping it cool. Subscribe now and let's groove our way to a future that's as awesome as Lyon's beats. Thank you for being part of the cool crowd and standing against idiocy.